guys, it's me, Brenda. In the last episode, we saw how God talked to Moses through a burning bush that did not burn up. Moses was given the mission of leading the Israelites, which are also referred to as the Hebrews, to freedom along with his brother Aaron. The two of them were on their way to Egypt to tell Pharaoh to let their people go. When Moses and Aaron arrived in Egypt, they gathered together the leaders of the Hebrews to tell them the news that God was going to deliver them and lead them to the promised land. The leaders of the people bowed down to worship God. Then Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh. The God of Israel says, "Let my people go so they can worship me in the wilderness." "Who is the Lord that I should obey him?" replied Pharaoh. "I do not know the Lord, and I will not let his people go. If you do not obey God, he may bring plagues," warned Moses and Aaron. The same day, Pharaoh gave orders to the slave drivers to make the Hebrews work harder. They were no longer given straw to make bricks, but had to collect their own straw, while still making as many bricks as before. The slaves became exhausted searching for straw and making bricks. The Hebrew leaders complained to Moses and Aaron, "You have made Pharaoh hate us, and our lives are in danger." Moses spoke to God, "Why have you brought trouble on these people? I spoke to Pharaoh in your name, but you have not rescued them." God replied, "My mighty hand will drive the people out of Egypt. I keep my promises. I will take you as my people, and I will be your God." Moses reported this to the Hebrew leaders, but they were too discouraged by their bad treatment to listen to him. God told Moses and Aaron to visit Pharaoh again. He warned that Pharaoh would not listen to them, but God will bring plagues on the Egyptians until they let his people go. Moses and Aaron left for the palace. Pharaoh demanded that Moses and Aaron show him a miracle. Aaron threw his staff down and it became a snake. Pharaoh summoned his wise men and sorcerers. They threw down their staffs and their staffs also became snakes. But Aaron's snakes swallowed up their snakes. Despite seeing the great power of God, Pharaoh refused to let the Hebrew slaves go. God told Moses and Aaron to go down to the river Nile, where Pharaoh went in the morning. They had a message from God to give to Pharaoh. "Let my people go, so that they may worship me in the wilderness." Pharaoh refused, so Aaron did what God had instructed and struck the river Nile with his staff. The fish died, the Egyptians could not drink the water, and the river smelt. Pharaoh's magicians did the same thing by their secret arts. Pharaoh refused to obey God. 7 days later, God told Moses to tell Aaron to stretch his staff over the streams, canals, and ponds, to make frogs come out onto the land. Pharaoh's magicians used their secret arts and were able to do the same. Frogs were everywhere, and Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron. "Pray to your God to take the frogs away from my people, and I will let your people go," promised Pharaoh. Moses replied, "So you will know there is no one like God. The frogs will leave you and your houses tomorrow." Moses prayed to God and he answered. The frogs died, and the dead frogs were piled into heaps, and the smell was really bad. Pharaoh, however, broke his promise and refused to let the Hebrews go to worship God in the wilderness. So God told Moses to tell Aaron to strike the dust with his staff, and the dust would become gnats. Pharaoh's magicians tried, but could not do this. "This is the finger of God," they told Pharaoh. Pharaoh still had a hard heart and refused to let the Hebrews go and worship God. Moses and Aaron then told Pharaoh that swarms of flies would buzz around the Egyptians, but not the Hebrew slaves in Goshen. Then swarms of flies came into the palace and the houses of the Egyptians, but the flies stayed away from the Hebrew slaves. Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron. "I will let you go and offer sacrifices to your God, but you must not go far. Now pray to God to stop the flies." Moses prayed, and the next day the flies left. But Pharaoh broke his promise and refused to let the Hebrew slaves go. Moses went to Pharaoh again. "If you refuse to let my people go, tomorrow God will bring a terrible plague on your livestock. But the livestock of the Hebrews will be spared." The next day, the livestock of the Egyptians died, and Pharaoh still refused to let God's people go. Moses took ashes from a furnace and threw it into the air in front of Pharaoh. God says, "This ash will become a fine dust, and people and animals will get boils." But Pharaoh still refused to let God's people go. God sent Moses to tell Pharaoh that he was going to show his power by sending the worst hailstorm Egypt had ever had. Anyone not sheltering inside would be risking their life. The officials of Pharaoh, who feared God, brought their families and animals indoors, but those who ignored God stayed outside. When Moses raised his staff, lightning filled the skies, and large hailstones came pounding down. Those caught outside were killed, but the storm did not hit the slaves hidden in Goshen. I have sinned. The Lord is right, Pharaoh told Moses. I will let you go. Moses went out of the city and spread out his hands to God. The thunder and hail stopped. Pharaoh, however, then changed his mind and stubbornly refused to let God's people go. He thought he could defy God, but God was not finished with him yet. So far, we've seen the first 7 plagues that have struck Egypt, and next Sunday we'll learn about the other 3 plagues that are left, and then the exodus of the Hebrews from Egypt. Throughout all the stories we've learned from the book of Exodus, we've been able to see the theme of God always has a plan for our lives. All the previous events of the book of Exodus form part of God's plan. Every single detail was planned by God. These plagues were meant to show God's power to the Egyptians and make Pharaoh free the Hebrews. So remember, even though you may have difficulties or things don't go the way you plan, God is in control of everything and always has a plan for our lives. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye!